Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and we acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuits whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. First agenda item is Town of Blackfalds Fire Report 2024. Robert Colt, Fire Chief.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. For Blackfalds Fire Department, the year in review for 2024. Currently, the fire department has a roster of 24 members that are ready to serve our community. The department is currently increasing our membership and is always eager to accept new applications from interested residents. Last year, every Wednesday evening, our training nights for all our members were our Wednesday evenings, and our new recruits are expected to attend an additional night of training, mentoring every Tuesday evening as part of their probationary period. And our membership currently, 85% of our members are trained to our level 1, level 2, NFPA 1001, level 1, level 2, and our NFPA 472 hazmat awareness and operation levels. 92% of our members have completed their ICS 100 training. And I did not put in the review, but 40% of our members have ICS 200 as well. In addition to the Wednesday nights and the weekend trainings, the membership is involved in community events throughout the year, from Winterfest, Blackfall Days, fire prevention tours, the Fun Run, Fire Prevention Week, and extremely popular Santa runs. Last year, we also took part in the RCMP open house, which is now every August, I believe. During 2024, the fire department updated the fire protection bylaw. We continually work on fire prevention with new and existing businesses in town and inquiries from commercial businesses in the 2 industrial parks, so Aspeland and Burbank. The fire safety plans were introduced in the fall for any new construction and demolition as per National Building and Fire Codes. And along with town administration, along with both councils, our town council and Lacombe County Council, finalized the new fire services agreement that took effect October 22nd of 2024. With the growth that we are experiencing as a community, we have started to discuss the needs of the fire services from apparatus and the facility itself. In 2024, the fire department responded to 272 calls, which is a 10% increase in call volume from 2023. In the table that was provided, you can see the incident types. The alarm calls, we responded to 120 alarms. CO alarms, 7 calls. Fire and brush fires, 16 of them. Fire outside fires, so fire pits or inquiries about fire investigations, 10 incidents. Garbage fires, rubbish fires, 2. Structure fires, 7. Vehicle fires, 6 of them. Gas leaks, 2. Hazardous materials, 3. Illegal burning, 5. Investigations of fires, another 5. Odor complaints or investigations, 1. We responded to 25 medical calls. Motor vehicle accidents, 47. Mutual aid calls for assistance, 9. And public hazards, 7. So public hazards can be being locked out of their vehicle, trapped in an elevator. We've had 4 of them this year, or last year. And those are the hazard types. Now, the next page shows a pie chart of the percentages of the calls that I just read off. So it gives you an indication of how big the alarm calls are that we respond to. Motor vehicles, 17% of the time, medical is 9%, and it breaks it down in percentages. Now, if you're curious, I also included the alarm calls continue to be the most incident type annually, and these are the types of the calls that we get when it comes to alarm calls. So you can see cooking incidents, 41 of those 120, right? Yeah, those, human error, 8 calls, and those are anywhere from hitting the keypad with the wrong PIN numbers, or they have people watching their places and they don't give them the PIN, right? Renovations, 3 calls. Steam, so showers, 10. Right? Equipment malfunction, 16, and unknown causes, 12. So that gives you an idea of the alarm types when we say we responded to 120 calls, and that's a breakdown of the most common type. The last page was a 5-year comparison of the top 4 incidents. So in 2024, for structure fires, we had 7 motor vehicle incidents, 47 alarm calls, 120 in medical calls, 25. So over the 5 years, you can see our medical calls are pretty consistent, right? Whether they're in the town. Lacombe County, the only time we really go out into the county is if, like we've had a couple out at Burbanks, so campers, or they're industrial accidents, so workplace incidents. And you can see how many times we've responded into the county of Lacombe for 2024, 54 calls. And one of them was a structure fire. Motor vehicle accidents, 17. So with the motor vehicles, you're looking at 31 of those motor vehicle accidents out of the 47 were in the town limits. So Highway 2A, a traffic circle, or Vista, we'll say, Womax Road. And 17 were out in the county, so mostly Highway 2. Are there any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Can I have a motion to accept this as information? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Now we'll have the Town of Blackfalds Police Report for 2024. Andrew Allen. And I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, the S in front of the sergeant, what's that?
Staff Sergeant.
Staff Sergeant. Thank you.
Your Worship, Councillors, thank you for your time. Pull up whatever slide is number 1 there that you have up. The first slide there is a snapshot of the municipal side of our operations, 9 positions with 2 vacancies. That doesn't include the new position that was just approved. In total for the detachment, we're looking at 28 regular members with 2 what we call hard vacancies and 3 soft vacancies. The soft vacancies included duty to accommodate, a gradual return to work, which should be back to work very shortly, and then a long-term ODS that we're trying to resolve. And the hard vacancies are the 2 that are unstaffed. One of the hard vacancies in the municipal position has been named. We're just waiting for April 1st to get the move to be paid for and get them down here from Peace River. The next slide, not the financial breakdown expert. All I know is this shows that we're well within the estimates of where the end of the fiscal year should be. And it doesn't look like anything's out of what was planned. If we go to the next slide, it just shows the PROS files or crime code files that were generated by the year. I can't explain why 2022 dipped down so low. But 2023 and 2024 are very consistent, an ever so slight increase that could just be with population growth, but nothing off the charts that's looking odd. And slightly below that is just a comparison from month to month, which again, it shows very consistently with last year, with just a slight increase here and there. The next slide is a little bit more of interest when it comes to scheduling planning and planning for policing resources. It shows the generated file times. And while there is an increase in certain hours that you can see there, a lot of that is self-generated by having more members working in the afternoons. What it does show is there's calls for service 24 hours a day, and this is just municipal policing. So it backs up the need for 24-hour policing and having members working at all times. The next slide, if you wanted to compare the two, is actually calls for service from the public. There were an awful lot more self-generated files when more members are working, but the public is still calling in at every single hour of the day and every single day of the week. And the expectation is a member is going to respond quickly. The next slide, if it's possible to see both of them at the same time, the green box and the blue box. The green box is showing what the most calls for service are by count. It's an awful lot of traffic stuff. We get the suspicious people, the vehicles, the property checks, well-being, assisting the general public, obviously crashes and mischief. That's what the calls for service are. But if you look at the top, what's increasing and the most amount of time spent on anything is the mental health calls. We're working closely with the province. We're working closely with RPACT. A lot of that is wait times at hospitals that we can't do anything about as a police officer. But it's good for council and your worship to understand really what the time is being put in on these calls. It's not a high call for service. It's taking up a vast amount of our time to deal with them, though. That's more of a concentrated, big picture problem to deal with. We scroll down a bit. It's a comparison of call times, response times. We're, if anything, just slightly better than the average, but right in there. The municipality, almost 35% of all calls are being responded to within 5 to 10 minutes. And then the vast majority is the 10 to 15. Very few take more than that. And they're probably exigent circumstances, well within what any other municipal similar detachment in the province is dealing with. The next slide is the crime stats. This is both a year-to-year change. If you look on the far right-hand side, it's a percentage change from 2023 to 2024, but also a 5-year snapshot. You can dive into these numbers and try breaking them apart, but the big ones are right at the bottom with total criminal code. We're still going in the right direction. 5-year averages are way down, but even year to year, we're still looking at a decrease in criminal code overall calls. And that is consistent with most places across the province when you compare them. The next two slides break it down just a little bit more. If we go to the one more down. This is a snapshot of Blackfalds specifically. It's a 24% decrease overall of criminal code offenses, and it'll break down kind of where we're at. Property crime's about the same. It's the person's crime, the violent crime that is down, despite what perception is. A little bit more of theft under, but overall we're still down. I'm not trying to be a fear mongerer or point out anything. This is very similar, but better than most other detachments in our general area of central Alberta. But if we go one slide down, it's not to throw anyone under a bus and it's not to be whatever. This is what's down the road in Red Deer. Same snapshot of time, that's up across the boards. I would guess it's a congregation of services being brought in. Lots of more resources there, attracting more people. You're going to get the spinoffs, the negatives and the positives. But it's something to keep in mind of when Blackfalds is expanding and growing, of what's just 5 or 10 kilometers down the road. And they're doing the best they can. It's not a big stretch that this is nearby. Next is just a photo of one of the more high-profile cases here this past year, and really a great indication of what that plainclothes GIS section does. That thankfully we're getting another member because they were overworked. That you supported the payment and paying for the extra person there. That's going to go specifically to this unit. The amount of work they did to solve that armed robbery was vast. Hundreds of hours of combing video and getting warrants and doing cell phone work and there was just so much work done. GD members would not be able to do that. And those two people at the time worked so hard to get this, and the results are amazing. That's just a snapshot of what we're going to be able to do with one extra person. It's just going to pay its dividends tenfold. And finally, the last is just the combination of the two things. That's also the part of the GI section, doing some extra work with just down the road at the ice rink. They brought the radar gun, and we're trying to measure for the kids how fast they were going. So they try to balance off the two different things. The monthly reports that come in from the GIS section, I'm unbelievably proud of the work they've been doing. And that's kind of a snapshot of where we're at right now and where the stats are. Is there any questions you'd like me to address specifically?
Councillors? Mayor Hoover?
Thanks, Staff Sergeant. We're always hoping to be able to advocate for better results in our community, and there's some things that are somewhat limited under control, but it's really blatantly obvious when you're showing those stats, the amount of time that's being spent with mental health calls. So can you just dive into that a little bit in terms of, is that something that is improving? Are there any particular resources that are helping ease that wait time? And what is it that the community could potentially do to advocate to help ease some of that burden?
That's a complicated answer, and without getting off script of what the official divisional lines are, I think it comes down to just services being offered, and wait times is the big one. There's an expectation from the public that when they call 911, we respond, and we are not medical professionals and need to hand it off, and there's no one to hand it off to. It's much bigger than a policing issue. We do have that RPAC unit that has a nurse and health services that drive around, but they're still just assessing, and that's not an ability to take someone anywhere. It's big picture services.
So then ultimately your officers are being called on to transport people when there's lack of resources to do that. And would you say that's also because of a lack of, or a challenge, a similar challenge that EMS is having, that they're not able to respond to these calls?
It's across the board. Yeah. We would take them to a hospital, and then we have to sit there and wait until a doctor or a healthcare professional can take them into their custody. And we don't have the luxury of just letting them out of the police car at the hospital. They're in our care until we turn them over to someone.
Yeah.
And we are at the mercy of waiting for that care.
Now I can relate it. It's been probably 25 years since I've worked in EMS, and that was the problem back in the day when I worked there, getting to the hospital. A lot of the delays were turnovers in the hospital, and obviously that's probably worse than it was 25 years ago. As I said, I know that we're not going to be able to offer a solution, but when it comes to having those conversations with our other levels of government, in terms of the cost that this is indirectly to our community, it's significant when we have officers that are tied up for hours upon end at the emergency waiting to turn over a patient.
The trickle down effect is huge, and
Right.
it compounds itself by the two major hospitals we have to take them to is outside of our jurisdiction.
Right.
So if you only have 3 members working at 3 a.m. and 1 or 2 of them are tied up at Red Deer City Hospital,
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's often, or not as often, that we get to talk to our government Alberta counterparts. It's nice to have a solid message and know one of the many things that are a problem when it comes to we all know healthcare services are strained, but this is one of those things that it has a trickle down effect that impacts us in a lot of different ways. So, okay. Anytime that, I know that you're trying to give official answers, potentially if there's any information that you can pass through our administration, specifically in our community that, that we can advocate for, please do.
I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Your worship.
Our business item, report for direction, community service framework, council policy draft.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. Each one of our departments are working on framework policies within our own departments. Framework policies provide a set of guidelines, rules, and principles that govern the direction and decision-making process for the department, and they help us align the policies and procedures of our community services department with our overall goals and values. Similar to like a mission, vision statement, it kind of makes it on a larger scale, puts it into policy form. So we brought this forward to the February 5th Recreation, Culture, and Parks Board meeting, where we had some amendments made, some effective changes that we felt were well received by the RCP board. So we're bringing them forward to council for any comments or questions or amendments.
Council, any questions? Councillor Appel?
Just not a question, just a comment that I think, some of the items that were discussed at the RCP have been adjusted, so
There's no questions. We have a recommendation. Councillor Sands?
If nobody has anything else, I'm prepared to move that the Standing Committee of Council recommends to Council to bring forward the draft Community Services Framework Policy to a future regular Council meeting for consideration.
All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Do you get the next one too?
I do have the next one. I didn't know if you wanted to list out the item or not, but.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
All right, so we have a request for decision, community incentive grant policy amendment.
Yes, thank you once again. So we had a community initiatives grant application come to the Recreation, Culture, and Parks Board. In that application, it was noted that it is a for-profit organization that was applying to run a provincial event. Currently, as per the guidelines, for-profit organizations are ineligible to apply. So we do feel that the event is a good community event, and it helps put Blackfalds on the map, and it's not staff driven. So this is kind of fitting in that way. But we just thought we would bring this forward to council for I guess, their blessing to look at changing the guidelines for the Community Initiatives Grant Program to allow for the consideration of for-profit organizations. And I have in here provided that any proceeds from the event goes towards a community initiative program or project deemed worthy. So with that, discussions, I guess.
Councillor Swab?
Thank you. Yeah, we had quite a discussion about this one at the rec board, and I really feel that our hands were tied unless we brought this to council. So it is a great, it's a great grant policy, and this would allow for the profit business to come and do something within our community, but it's keeping the grant funds for that, not to go towards the profit of the company, but to help us have people in the event come to our community. So it would be used just like a non-for-profit organization would use it. So I think it definitely does benefit our community, and we all supported it at the rec board.
Mayor Hoover?
Thank you, through the chair. Just, I wouldn't mind, some ideas of, examples of what kind of organizations potentially we're looking at. I mean, the only one that I can think of for profit that I would consider a benefit to our community with like a race organizer or something to that effect, where they potentially make a profit. But were there specific kind of businesses that we feel would benefit the community?
Yeah, in this particular situation, it's centered around a sport. So, and it could be really anybody that wants to provide an event that they don't get to collect any of the profits from that event. So even if myself, I want to run an event, I'm not a for-profit organization, but I'm not a nonprofit either. So I think this just makes it easier for people that want to do something good for the community to put on an event.
Councillor Swab?
So for instance, like baseball, we approve grants for them to come to our community to have a tournament. So this is a sporting event where somebody in our community has a sport that they do, but they're a for profit. But it's something that would be like in the Olympics and stuff, right? So it is a good sport to have. It's his company, but it's not his company. It's targeting sport, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Well, and then, as usual, these are kind of geared towards sports, though, for the most part, right? I haven't really got culture discussions here.
It was a local company that's looking to help bring the national tournament. Provincial tournament, and then potentially nationals in a few years
Right.
to Blackfalds. But
Right.
the person who brought it to us is a local business, but it's not, even though they're bringing forward the ask, it's not for their business. It's to help host a provincial wide event.
Right.
So because it said no for-profit organizations could apply, that's what this adjustment is for. That way, if we do have things like this come forward in the future, we can judge them on a project by project basis, as opposed to saying, well, absolutely not, because you're an actual business and not a non-for-profit.
And just, I should have this number in my head, but what is this grant sitting at right now? Is this
It's at the full 17,000.
17,000? Yeah. So it's still pretty limited. There wouldn't be a lot to give for some of these. Do we consider in kind as part of this grant, or is that something that we're typically improving separately?
So in kind, so for example, if somebody was asking for free rental, what they should really be doing is applying through this granting program and then receiving that, in kind, that rental amount back through the grant.
Yeah. And if we're talking about having funneling in kind requests through this process, I think I'd have an easier time for it, because I think we wrestle every year with the limited amount of funds and the number of organizations that really could benefit from this. I fully understand, though, that some of these events that come to us that wouldn't qualify because they ultimately do take money away from this would have a bigger impact for our community probably than some of these other ones that are getting it. But I would greatly like to see some of these other requests come to us that are asking for field or the arena or something to that effect, or some staff time that's going to help their organization or their event get off the ground, that it's going to make a big impact. So I do like that. Yeah.
Councillor Dennis?
I kind of like the idea of only using this for our groups that are in town, because I've been asked by taxpayers, what do I get out of this? What do I see out of my tax dollars going to pay for for this kind of thing. And well, it could promote motels and whatnot, but we've heard at economic development meetings, motels are closing in Red Deer, Black Knight Inn, Red Deer Lodge. They're downsizing. Like the reality of us gaining on something like that as a taxpayer, I had a hard time to justify it when I was asked that. And I don't know if anyone can help me answer that question when I'm asked by a taxpayer.
And I think it does depend, I guess, on the event. If it's especially provincial, you're going to have a lot of people that will be coming from further distances. So they're going to be probably eating, getting gas, other things like that in town, not just a hotel.
So what's that going to help me as a taxpayer? I guess is what I'm asking for them.
Yeah, I think what it would just do is it spurs that economic tourism, the sport tourism, just attracts more businesses to town, which then you get more business or tax revenue from commercial. That's a very long down the road kind of thing, but yeah.
I think of myself living here for 30 plus years. And it was like, let's get businesses in town so our taxes can go down.
Mm-hmm.
But I really haven't seen that happen. Like we've got a lot of new growth coming into town, like residential and whatnot. Maybe it's better to focus on like businesses that'll attract businesses because there'll be more need for that than giving our taxpayers money to. That's just my thought. Thank you.
Councillor Swab?
So as a taxpayer, it's not only bringing tourism and helping our economic growth, but it's also supporting our children and it's supporting our families and our community. So like there's many people interested in baseball and hockey and other sports. So maybe the family's never seen this certain activity. So they're going to go and they're going to support it, but their kids might be interested or they might be interested in an adult. So it could bring another business or a potential group into our community where we don't have to travel as taxpayers to other people's communities to actually go and do that. So it does open up a lot more than just tourism. So, and businesses, and it could bring a new business again to town. We just don't know. And it puts Blackfalds on the map, it could also increase our resident population as well. So, which would increase our taxpayers as well. And then another thing I was going to say, because it's a for-profit, it does like this would go through the rec board, but then it comes to council for further approval. So our hands aren't tied at the rec board level, but at the council level, if we needed to tie hands, that's where we would stop the vote for whatever comes forward as a for-profit business.
Mayor Hoover?
Yes, thank you. I've wrestled with a similar question, but I would venture to say I think the answer that come to me is that probably most of the things that the town provides, we can't really, give a solid response as to how that benefits, our taxpayers. You could say that about family and community services. How does that actually? We spend a lot of money on those services. How do we get any return? But I think these questions could exercise an economic developer to talk about this, because there's estimates in terms of certain types of events and how they can overall benefit the economy in a community. It's probably the easiest way to state it, but it is an extremely difficult direct answer to give to a community member. And I answer a lot of these questions from the community work. I don't use the Eagle Builder Center. How does this benefit me? We spend a lot of money on that, and there's no benefit back to me. They're probably right. There's probably things that cost us a lot more that are harder to measure than bringing 1,000 people to the community to do an event. So it's difficult, and it crosses over. This crosses over to economic development. So I'm wondering if how we integrate some of the economic developers priorities into this grant too, because some of the things, and I think I brought it to yourself and the EDO that have come to me, requests for things that they're borderline, whether they're economic development or whether they're recreation, and they would probably benefit from grants such as this or from support from the community. So it's difficult to equate those into solid numbers though back to our residents. So it would be interesting to have our economic development officer in here to answer a little bit of that though. So that's my spin on it.
Councillor Appel?
Thank you. So I think what this grant gives us back as a town is that now we have a third party, an independent or group that's working on bringing those provincials here to town. It's not our staff that has to go search for these things and try to apply, and all those hours and hours of work that go into hosting these types of events. It's saving us that for a minimal amount overall. The grants are $17,000, which is very small line in our budget. But that's the sort of thing that it gets us. New ideas, new things that we don't necessarily have time to have our staff go out and look for.
It's a question. So when we give out grants, we ask for those organizations to give a report
That's right.
back afterward. So
That's right.
what information is it specifically? And at this point, it's nonprofits. So so that's one question. What information is it? And do we foresee there being a different report that we're asking back from a for-profit?
I just think that we'd want to know where the proceeds are going towards in that report.
And how it's not directly
Yeah,
going into their
profiting that
profits.
business, yeah.
So that's kind of big. So I agree that we should be getting that kind of information back. I just
Yeah.
wonder in what form that we're asking that. But I do support the idea because I think that there are some great events that have an intangible but benefit to our community.
Councillor Appel?
Thanks. Yeah, so item 6.5, Mayor Hoover says local organizations must submit a final report outlining associated costs, participation and or attendance figures, and an overall summary of the initiative. I will say that this group has also provided a budget for their event, and the amount that they're asking from us will not fully cover their event in any way, shape, or form. So the thought that there would be additional profits at the end of this, based on the grant money that we're providing, it would be mostly going to rental of facilities.
I know that you guys are looking at this from the perspective of one particular funding request. I'm just trying to look at this in terms of how this might unfold for other requests in the future for profit.
I have a comment. I think this is something that as a town that we might be very profitable for us, bringing people in and stuff like that. And from the comments here tonight, I'm assuming that as we approve each individual one, we'll have more sort of control in regards to where the profits that come back and where they go. And I think it will be a good thing. Trial run, like most bylaws, we can change it if it doesn't work. With that said, we do have, administration recommendation. Councillor Schwab.
I'll move that the Standing Committee of Council recommend amending the Community Initiatives Grant Policy to allow for-profit organizations to apply, provided that any proceeds from their initiative go toward a community initiative, program, or project deemed worthy.
Any further comments or questions? Administration?
So it will get amended, then that policy has to come back.
Back to
and
council.
Will get a chance to vote on whether you want to approve the policy at that time. Just wanted to
Okay.
make sure that council is aware of that.
Do we need to vote on this? Okay, I call for the vote. All in favor? It's carried
Thank you.
unanimously. 4.3 is the request for decision on enterprise fleet management by Director Brusher.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. So at the last council meeting some time ago, we had a request on more information about the enterprise fleet management system. So as you're aware, the town entered into an agreement with enterprise fleet management to enhance our management capabilities and improve the life cycle of town vehicles. Since entering into this agreement, the town has started working with enterprise fleet management to prioritize fleet replacement options, which has led to multiple discussions on strategies to maximize cost savings. These discussions have resulted in a slight shift in the town's approach to this partnership. Under standard versus non-standard vehicles, the list of non-standard vehicles not only include fire and municipal enforcement vehicles, but has grown to other units like outfitted with dump box, flat decks, and mechanics bodies. As a result of the list of standard units that would apply to this strategy has shrunk to 17, while the non-standard list has grown to 16. These non-standard units can be ordered through the Enterprise Fleet Management Program. However, they will not be part of the 3-year replacement cycle. There's 3 different methods that we've listed in this memo here. The prepaid lease payments. So this is where we've taken our equity and prepaid the lease into the program. By doing this, we do save the interest cost associated with the lease. As a result of these discussions, we've decided to take a mixed approach. So we're going to buy some outright and mix them, and some lease ones up into the actual budget there. So under financial implications, there's 3 definitions there. The prepaid lease is to prepay all the lease payments to eliminate the interest. The normal lease, which is utilize the typical lease structure to minimize cash flows. And the mixed, which is a combination that targets minimizing interest and limiting cash outflows. So the 3 columns there is pretty much the prepaid lease. So that's using our larger capital outlays to minimize interest. The center there is the normal lease. And then we've got the mixed is what we're doing there. So we're looking at our 17 normal vehicles. So we in the mix there, we're going to prepay 9 over the next 3 years and lease 8 of them. So essentially what we're going to do is trying to minimize the interest that we give to the company, but yet it's turn over our vehicles every 3 years. So that's the cash outflows in that top table. And in 28, 29, and 2030, we do have equity coming back in. Because we prepay the vehicles in year 1, we get most of that equity back in year 3. So the cash outlays in year 3 will be minimized compared to a normal lease. Throwing a lot of figures here at you, but really the bottom line there is the full 3 years life cycle of 17 vehicles. So the mixed approach, which is the right-hand corner there, is looking at $286,000 to turn over 17 vehicles every 3 years. So that equates to around $5,600 worth of depreciation every year, which that's what we're trying to get to. If we've had done the normal lease, the full cost would be $340,000. And then, of course, the prepaid lease with using our own cash would be the lowest cost of ownership at $237,000 or about $4,500 a year per vehicle. In summary there, the town has initiated the 2025 orders using a mixed approach from the above, ordering 2 half-tons through the typical leasing model and prepaying the lease payment on 1 half-ton and 1 3/4-ton. The remaining budget will be used to replace non-standard truck with a specialized mechanic body. The vehicles are being replaced will be sold by Enterprise Fleet Management, and the proceeds will come back into the town's fleet reserve to help fund future replacements. So there's no motion listed in this memo, but if council would like to receive this for information, I'll accept that one. If there's any questions.
Councillor Schwab?
Thanks. I appreciate you bringing this back to us since I was the one that had requested it.
Sure.
I was wondering, since our non-standard vehicles list has grown quite substantially, are we required to purchase our vehicles through Enterprise Fleet Management for them, or can we look for the best bang for our buck on those vehicles that they can't provide all those services we thought in the beginning.
So definitely the non-standard vehicles that we say it was like a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton, we can direct who we buy them off. So we have solicited a couple of vehicles through Ford. So we're using their program. However, we still want to kind of spend local, and the pricing difference between what they got and local was pretty minimal. So that's why we're saying, can you still use our vendors within? And it's a common thing for most municipalities to try and support their local business instead of of Calgary and Edmonton. So we have done that we are getting the best bang for our buck through our local dealerships. If that makes sense.
Sounds good. Thank you.
No trouble.
Mayor Hoover?
Now, I don't speak very good finance, so I'm sure you can give a much more complicated answer to this question than I'm looking for. But I'm trying to understand the risk factor in this, in terms of, because it seems like there's a lot of cost upfront for these, and of course, with those costs, the next council, for example, if they don't support moving forward with this, do they have the option to back out?
Yeah.
And what is the risk for the savings? Because it sounds like we don't really realize the benefits to this lease program until about year 3-4.
Correct. Yeah. So in year 3.05, I think was their calculation. So I would say I would answer that question with using our own cash. There's zero risk. Because we've pretty much prepaid 100% of that vehicle. So if we want to exit the program, we own 100% of that equity. If we had leased it in 3 years' time, we still owed another 2 years on that vehicle. So if a new council came in and said, "Hey, let's pull 17 vehicles out of this program," there'll be a sum of money that we'd have to come up with to buy the vehicles out and leave the program. The safer way is using our own cash. So we own 99.99% of that vehicle. So at any one time that, hey, the program's not working for us, we're not seeing the savings, that's our equity. It's not halfway in between enterprises and ours. So that's really, there's no risk. However, if there's a full fleet within the leasing, there'll be a cash outlay to buy them out of the lease, and then we go our separate ways. But we still stand behind the 33 or 34 municipalities that turn vehicles over every 3 years, and it must be working for them. So once again, we're really looking at the numbers, making sure it makes sense for us, and the time will tell once we go to trade them in 3 years' time.
So in that mixed scenario, which kind of vehicles are going to be the traditional lease? Because I think the majority, the
Non-standard?
non-standard vehicles are going to go through the enterprise program. Those things will swap out every 3 years, correct?
Sorry,
Or is the
the
other way
non-standard ones are kind of outside the program.
Okay, so that's like the brush trucks.
Exactly. And that's where it doesn't make sense to turn that over 3 years. It's just really our half tons that we get people, zipping around the city.
And we're leasing those vehicles as opposed to buying
we're
those
leasing
outright?
two, just budget this year. We bought 2 outright, and we're leasing 2, I think I've mentioned there. However, the intent probably next year to ask for the budget to buy them out. A quick little, if we had done this program for 8 years, our interest cost alone on 17 vehicles was upwards of $400,000. So we're like, well, that's a bad figure. So how can we get around that? We use our own cash, own reserves, and then we got that full equity coming back every 3 years. So really the first 3 years of this program, if we use our own cash, is the strong outlay. And then we start having that cash come back in, hopefully around $15,000 a unit, lower than what we purchased it at. So,
okay. Like I said, I'm not. There's no way I could look at this and break this down in terms of all the benefits. I know that you probably, no doubt, looked at this with the lens of what is our lowest risk. But mine is what happens from the governance perspective, from a group of people potentially that is going to see a massive outlay and say, how to. I don't like that. I don't want it. I want to back out of it, and I want to make sure that we're taking the lowest risk profile.
For sure.
When it comes to that.
I'll give you another scenario. Say in 3 years' time, the used market drops, which I doubt it, but and say the depreciation on the vehicle is $20,000. We've got the decision then to say, hey, are we going to keep it or are we going to trade it in? Does it make sense that we just eaten all that depreciation to do it again? Well, no, it doesn't. So we'll pull that out of the program, or we own it. So there's those having the full purchase price of the equity. We've got options, in 3 years or 4 years time. If we want to keep it another year because it's running good, and the real estate, the resale market's not there, we've got options. But if we've leased them, we kind of just go through the motions. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
Yeah.
specifically knowing that we have options.
Yeah,
in
for
this.
sure.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions or comments, Councillor Swab?
I was just ready to make a motion. Did you have anything else?
No.
No? Okay.
Oh, that was going to be my question.
So like I said, I appreciate this coming back because when we first had voted on this, things have changed quite a bit. And I would love to accept this as information.
Receive. That's the no worries. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, sorry. All in favor? Thank you. Now we have a request for direction, Councillor reimbursement. That's a tongue tire. for me.
Council remuneration and compensation policy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. The current council remuneration and compensation policy was approved in November of 2021. So typically what happens is prior to the next election, there's been a committee formed that looks at council remuneration. As per the policy, a council remuneration review is completed and recommendations delivered to council by the first regular meeting in August. In review of the policy, it was identified that the policy template changed since 2021 to remove the procedures from the policy. The policy was transferred to the new template and some minor additions and edits were made to the policy for council's consideration. The notable changes to the policy include applied principles for equitable and fair compensation to represent the roles and responsibilities of elected officials. There was an addition of 4 principles that could be applied to assist with establishing fair compensation. Options for conducting the review, because right now the only option was that there would be a council committee. So I've added 3 options there for council to consider, which at the time when it's going out, council can determine whether you would like there to be a council committee, an administrative review, or if you would like to have a third party review that. The draft policy provides for the 3 options, which I've just referenced. And then I've also reorganized the items and deleted some of the administrative details to provide the chief administrative officer with latitude to determine additional administrative resources based on the individual workloads and priorities. And then the terms of reference template, the terms of reference for the council remuneration review was moved into a format that administration is recommending to be used for committees. So under discussion, administration is seeking direction from council on whether the above noted changes are satisfactory to council. Administration recognized that significant updates and improvements could be made to the policy. However, in essence of time and the fact that the policy will be reviewed again once the recommendations have been approved by council, it was determined that it was not necessary at this stage. So I'm just opening this up to any specific questions that council may have on the policy at this stage. And then again, it'll have to come forward to future council meeting for approval.
Councillor Appel?
Thank you. Through the chair to CAO Isaac. How do you define the difference between a council committee and a task force? Or what would you say are the differences between a council committee and a task force?
Sorry. The council committee, I see that as being more of an external, where we would be bringing in residents from the community. A task force could be a combination of having members of the community as well as maybe some more dedicated support as far as consulting support, that type of thing.
Okay, so that's yeah, in line more of what we've done in the past.
Yes.
Has been consultants with community members. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, my only thought was just because in the policy, it calls it a council committee.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that it wouldn't be a committee of actual council members.
Correct. Yes.
That it
Yes.
would be a
A
completely
volunteers.
separate
Yeah.
committee. Okay, and then I did have just a couple of questions on items in the policy, just that I think they were out of date in the old policy, but they just didn't quite get updated.
Okay.
I only have two. One is item 6.7. Honorarium and per diem claims will be submitted on the applicable form and submitted no later than 2 days prior to the pay date.
Okay.
We don't do that anymore. We do it through HRS
Oh,
Highway,
okay.
and the deadline is significantly sooner than 2 days
Okay. Okay.
the
Thank
pay
you.
date. So
Thanks, I
that
can-
one needs to be adjusted. And I feel like we had that wording. We just changed it on something else. Maybe our council procedural policy where we list our per diems and honorariums, or the half days or full days.
Mhm.
I think we adjusted the wording there, so it
Okay.
might be the same or similar. And then the other one being Appendix A, item number 5, the health and wellness spending account.
Mhm.
In here, it has it at $425, but I believe it is now $475.
Okay. So then that was updated
$500
possibly
even.
from
Sorry, $500.
500. Okay. So yeah, so this policy wasn't changed. Okay.
Yeah, and those were just the two items I found that I just were
Okay.
out of date and didn't get changed. But otherwise, yeah, as long as it's very clear that even if council creates a committee, council members would not be on it.
Right. Yeah.
And not so much confusion for us, but confusion for any member of the public reading this policy.
Okay. So I think the other thing that I would just have council think about before this policy comes back is how you would like to initiate that review of those options that I've provided. So that's just something to think about. This policy probably won't come back till maybe the March meeting, but just I think that would be kind of something for you guys to start to put your head to. Just as a note, we did have a recommendation from a report that was provided by George Cuff, where he did recommend that an external party look at so that's kind of why I wanted to provide you with a little bit more latitude within the policy to not just say it always has to be a council committee or whatever. So that's just one other comment that it's important for you to maybe think about over the next month or so.
You can push it one more time.
Sorry. Thank you. Through the chair to CEO, Isaac. And we already do have funds set aside in the budget this year for
Correct.
to hire a third party. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Mayor
And-
Hoover?
Yes, thank you. And just so we're on the, just looking at, little edits. I'm assuming that all these references that are in here, the appendixes will come back as part of that review as well?
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
noticed that.
This is just what's supposed to be currently what you
Yeah.
have in place today.
Yeah.
So thanks for identifying
Yeah.
those changes. But yeah, this is just a reflection, those appendixes, there was no changes to that. It was the actual reformatting of the policy.
Fair enough. Yeah. 'cause
But these will all come back after that review with whatever the updated recommendations are based on the review that's been completed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the only one thing that doesn't get reviewed though, but the policy probably needs a little tweaking is that elected official development opportunities policy.
Right.
Just, is
Yeah.
a little bit out of date. I think that was also 2021. And,
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I
So we
appreciate
could
that,
look at
that your question was similar to what I was going to ask, that council would never be on a committee, form a committee to review our own compensation. It's
That's
always
correct.
members of the public that do it.
Any further questions, comments? So we have a recommendation. Mayor Hoover?
Yeah, I'll make that motion that Standing Committee of Council recommend bringing forward the draft council remuneration and compensation policy forward to the March 11th, 2025 regular meeting of council for consideration.
Call a question. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. We have no confidential, and so I call the standing committee for February 18th adjourned at 8:01.